I'm Will Hedrick.
And I'm Jordan Schaffer.
And this is Dog Ears and Timestamps, a book club podcast.
Yeah. Dude, this time, we're just like, this book is so old and like still so relevant. It was weird because at some points we were listening or I was listening and I was like, okay, that just feels like it's like it almost feels older than the book was written. Like I think the book was written in like 1932 or something.
1937 was when it was published.
Okay. And so like there was one point where they were talking about like how they all needed to like I think it was like part of some song that the elves are singing, like merrily, like smoking, and it was about like smoking, but they used the word faggot, and I know that word is used like for like a cigarette in
most
UK.
of Europe.
Yeah. But it's like hearing it now, it almost seems like I don't think that even if they still use that term in Europe for a cigarette, I don't think
an editor would have told the author, we need to change that.
Yeah, you can't just drop F-bombs,
If you want this to sell outside of your town,
right?
We can't have that.
And also, like, while we were reading the story, how, like, the other books that we've been going through, like, it feels like it's really just so much build up. And then we have one big peak where it's like, whoa! And then it's like, and then the story's over. This one, it just felt like, boom, like it just felt like there were 4 or 5 different climaxes throughout the book. Like it felt like it was written in like it could have been a series like compartmentalized into different periods because each one kind of like was its own book. I feel like as part of the epic.
It's like constant adventure.
Yeah, exactly.
So there's, like you said, literally something happening every time, every time, constantly, the whole time. And I think that, and it was his first novel. It's written as a children's book. It was written the idea of narrative structure existed back then, but I wouldn't be surprised if things like what we're talking about happen more frequently then than it does now, just because now we've got another 70, 80 years of, writing practices being, refined and popularized. And so I think that exactly what you were saying, it just being from that time and being as influential as it is, that it is very different from the stuff that we've been reading. Yeah.
I feel like there were only a couple of times that really made me like, that really it stood out as being like, oh yeah, this is like, it's not a period piece or anything because it wasn't even written in the period that it was written about, you know what I mean? It wasn't written about the 1930s. It was written about a fantasy world that could be, well, back we would assume medieval-ish, kind of with castles and stuff.
Right.
But, I don't know if that's even what they would classify it as, since it's just another world. Yeah, man. I mean, and then this is the basis for all the fantasy characters. Basically, we know is like this is the bare bones. Like this is what dwarves are, and then this established like what a dwarf was basically forever. Like we can't like now I don't know, probably not now, but I feel like he either pulled that from people with dwarfism or dwarfism named it after that. Like, you know what I mean? Like, which came first? I don't know.
It was, so he didn't like invent these mystical races.
Oh, really? I thought he did. Maybe he's
elves have been a concept for much longer than that.
Oh, see, I thought he invented them.
Things like that. I don't know I haven't ever bothered to look at like, what was the first iteration of the modern day idea of an elf or the first iteration of a modern day idea of a dwarf. But that sort of stuff has been around for a very long time.
Okay. See, in my mind, it was like pre-Tolkien, it was like a world of like mythos. Like you'd have fairies or something. Like there'd be like little pixies or leprechauns or different things in the woods that like you might run into. But like when Tolkien came out with his book, The Hobbit, I just assumed that he was the one that created the base. I'm sure he's the one that popularized it, and that's what makes him more common to everybody nowadays. But I don't know. Maybe he didn't make it so common. I guess maybe it's just common nowadays because everybody knows Lord of the Rings. But maybe even back then it was just like, well, everybody knows what an elf is, so let me just make my own version for my fantasy. So he could have just gone with what fantasies were already around. I'm sure there's been fair folk creatures that have been written about for ages, just like probably short little people, and then I know for sure there have been like We used to live with little people, like little Hobbit people, like that were on a like I think about like 500 years ago. They were literally like small humans, like 4 foot tall humans. I think hobbits are shorter than that, but
according to the first page of search results, the earliest sort of thing that people have decided, is what elves and dwarves and other things must have come from were from early Germanic fairy tales.
Oh, okay.
So that's all been around for centuries and centuries and centuries.
For a long time.
As long as those stories have been around, which, it wouldn't be surprising if some of those are coming up on, like a millennia of existence in some cases. So yeah, the general fantasy creatures are around and permeate throughout even different regional, fairy tale and mythology. Things that are fairies or very like fairies can be found in literally every civilization's, mythology across the planet.
I feel like if we ran into a fairy in this book, it would have been evil. I don't know why I feel that way. Because I don't think we ever run into anything fairy-like in the whole
So far as I can immediately
universe.
remember, there's no fairies in the Lord of the Rings universe. Yeah. There are fairy-like beings of divinity, but they're not fairies. I wouldn't call them fairies. Yeah. Obviously, we read The Hobbit, and that's what we're talking about.
Yeah. And how'd you like it? This is obviously not your first time through The Hobbit.
This must be, like, at a minimum, my 10th time.
Yeah.
I really don't know, because I think I might have mentioned it last week, but I used to read the entire Lord of the Rings mythos every other year. And for a long time, it's been a long time since I had read any of it. At this point, it's probably been upwards of 6 years since I've read any of it. But it's just as good as it ever has been.
Okay.
The Hobbit is so perfect as like a narrative in like almost every way. It's like the appropriate length. None of the chapters, at least on the Kindle edition, are more than 10 pages.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So it's like, it's concise. It doesn't overthink itself. It doesn't do anything too much.
There weren't that many chapters, though, either, right? Like, weren't there only 20 chapters? 19, 20 chapters?
It's like 17 or 18, I think.
So it wasn't even 200 pages? Really?
Yeah. It's not, it's really, it's not much. It's, short and sweet and does everything that it sets out to do.
Yeah. I mean, I've read this book probably all the way through now just twice. Like, once when I was young, I remember reading it all the way through. And then a bunch of times throughout, like, my life, I remember starting it again and thinking, like, I'm going to reread The Hobbit, Like, I remember reading that, and The Lord of the Rings are coming out or whatever, and I just never finished it. Like, I'd always get to probably the same scene, like, where Bilbo escapes floating down the river on the barrels. Like, for whatever reason, it's like, okay, that's enough for me. Like, like, they've made it. Like, that's when I would probably start book 2. And then it would be book 2 of The Hobbit. It would be the second half of the journey from there. But I honestly... if they had made a book 2, it wouldn't have been any good. It would have been so short.
That's part of why the Hobbit movies are so awful.
Yeah, I never saw them. Should have been one. I don't know.
Just go ahead and do yourself a favor and don't.
That's what I've been told by other people than you. So.
There's 2 scenes that you should see. There's 3 scenes that you should see.
I can YouTube them.
You should see... Okay, there's 4 scenes that you should see. Okay. I'm going to keep increasing it. No, there's 4. You should see... whenever the dwarves first arrive at the unexpected party, and just them singing the song. The rest of it's a little bit too much. Now,
I could, because I think the
song at the end of the night, whenever none of the songs have titles, but it's the song about them returning to the mountain to claim their treasure. I think that
sing
was
it at the end of this book too, right?
They sing it. They sing a modified version of it while they're under siege.
Okay, that's what it was.
But that part in the beginning, I think, is worth watching just because I thought that was a good composition of the song. And then the next thing, you jump all the way to Riddles in the Dark with Gollum. Okay. That was a really well done scene.
Yeah, I could...
and then...
basically just the scenes from the main book, The Hobbit. None of the extra lore, right?
I mean, so much that's in those movies didn't actually happen or exist either.
Oh, really? So, yeah. I thought they got it all from...
There's this whole, like, love story between this made-up elf and Feely, one of the dwarves. Mm-hmm. And there's just, like, so much extra garbage. They're not good. But then after that, skip to whenever Bilbo speaks with Smaug.
I bet that was cool in the movie, too, yeah.
It was pretty cool. It was just interesting to see Smaug, and then Benedict Cumberbatch does the voice for him.
Yeah, you think that there's a cut together version of all of these? Like, if I went to YouTube and typed in the Hobbit actual scenes from the book,
right?
it would maybe cut them together. Because these all sound like scenes from the book that would be awesome to see on the big screen. But
for the longest time after the trilogy came out in film, I wanted The Hobbit to come out in film because I thought that it would be super awesome to see Smaug. Mm-hmm. I also wanted to see Thranduil's Kingdom in Mirkwood because that's it's aesthetically so different from Lorien.
Mirkwood seemed cool. I liked being there. Like, even though we get like captured in Mirkwood, but like, who's that? Who's the shapeshifter that we talked about?
Beorn.
Mm-hmm. Is that a scene in the movie?
Yes.
I bet that would be cool.
They did let Beorn stay in the movie, which was good.
I liked all the scenes of him in the movie. It just seemed like, or in the book, he seemed too big for, like, larger than life. Like, he was too big to even sit at his own table. And, like, the reason his table was so small was so that all his little animals could bring him food and stuff. Like, he made it easier for his critters to... Mm-hmm. and then he let him, like, ride out on his own ponies. And give them back whenever you're at the end of my kingdom. And then it's like, well, Bilbo's the only one that even noticed this big-ass bear that's been following us. The dwarves haven't noticed. And they're like, huh? And then it's like, and then Bilbo thought he saw the shadow of a bear disappear. And it's like, and he's been watching you guys this whole time. And they're like, what about you? He's like, I'm not giving back this horse.
Right. Gandalf's always like exempt from the rule.
I love Gandalf, dude. He's so funny. Like, that whole scene with Beorn is funny when he's introducing all the dwarves because he knows it'll piss him off if he has too many at once. But then he does it, like, slowly while telling him the story, but not giving him enough of the story at a time to keep him interested. And then he's just annoyed that the dwarves are coming in and he just wants it to stop so he can get the rest of the story. Right. That's just, like, that's probably my favorite scene in this book. Like, I don't know why. It's so silly.
It's really cleverly written.
That's probably why.
And, it's an example of Gandalf at his best whenever he's being, smarter than his target and being successful in doing so.
It's like wizardry without actual magic too. It's wizardry without.
That's one of the reasons that the Lord of the Rings is such a great mythos, in my opinion, is that all the magic is very subtle. There's very little that's ever overtly magic. Mm-hmm. Like, there's the one time, and I don't even, again, it's been several years since I've read any of it, but there's that one time in the movie where Saruman casts just like a straight up fireball. I don't think that happens in the book. And even if it does happen in the book, that's the one time that something overtly magical happens. Mm-hmm. Aside from just kind of like the general enchantment of the elves.
Or when Gandalf changes the color of a smoke ring. Like, that's obvious magic. But it's like, that's so petty. And
he didn't like mutter a spell to do it or anything like that. It was just like something that he can do. It's exactly. So it's really interesting.
What was the fourth scene in The Hobbit that I need to see?
Oh, it's literally the last like minute of the movie.
Oh, okay.
Because it's Bilbo writing the book there and back again and then closing it, and then there's a knock on the door. And if you watch the first minute of The Lord of the Rings, that's Gandalf knocking on the door at the beginning of the movie. Yes. So they knot the movies together very well, at least in a satisfying way for somebody that has seen everything and appreciates that sort of connection.
You just telling me gave me goosebumps.
So that part's really good. I felt like I spent several hours watching all three of those movies upset, and then that happened, and I was like, okay.
That's so funny how like one thing brings it all back, and it's like, well,
I was like, at least they finished it in a appreciable way. Not that it's like particularly clever to have done it that way. It's kind of obvious.
You saw it,
but seeing it, you're like,
Well, yeah, the fact that they would have enough like. I guess they didn't have any foresight with the Fellowship thinking like, well, we can make a Hobbit and then have it link in here. But they probably, watching it back later, it's like, oh, could link it up right here.
Well, that's how the book begins.
Right.
And, well, not literally how it begins in Fellowship, but that's how the party scene of the first, whatever chapter it's in, begins is Bilbo's running around his hobbit hole planning for the party, and then he's got a knock, and he, is running to not running to, he's like walking to the door shouting, no visitors, well-wishers, and all that sort of stuff, and then it's Gandalf. And so that is what happens and they have it do that way in the movie on purpose.
That movie's so good.
The trilogy is so good because they stick so well to the novels, and they, have to add a thing here or move a thing there or cut out something for time. But there's no betrayal of the novels. The Hobbit films are almost a total betrayal, in my opinion.
That actor that played Bilbo in the Lord of the Rings series, he was like renowned among all the other guys.
Ian Holm.
Yeah, he's like such a good actor that like, I don't know if this is necessarily a trait of a good actor, but one thing that the other people working with him noted and liked was that he wouldn't do every scene the exact same way. He might say all the lines the same, but he'd do something different with his aneurysms or the way he moves, or he might say something a little bit different for the line, but it would still work, and he said you could do a scene with him like 20 times and it'd be a little bit different every time. Yeah. Just like he wasn't going, he's like, okay, well, we're redoing it because they wanted something else, so he tries something a little different. And he said it was just very interesting because he's gotten a lot of renown he's an esteemed actor,
and that's like masterclass stuff for sure.
Oh yeah, and
certainly because I think from two different sides, because that means that one, you've got enough clout and skill that the director trusts you to be able to just like, I don't need you. We're redoing it, like we might be redoing this scene because of somebody else in the scene. What you did was great. So you don't necessarily need to change it, but if you want to change it, I'm going to let you, because I know you're going to continue to do it well, no matter what you do. And we'll have 20 takes in which you were great for different reasons, and then whatever. But then also that he's able to, then on his side do it and then do it well. So yeah, I think you're absolutely right. But in any case, I guess
let's hop into the book, the Hobbit book.
What was your favorite bit? I know you already talked about Beorn.
Honestly, some of my favorite stuff is like when they just give you, like when they're just kind of going over like little things about Bilbo, like like the unexpected party was really fun for me just because it's like
he's such a great character.
Yeah, he's so like, I don't know, he hasn't won us over yet, but he's very friendly, and he's like trying to appease all these dwarves that he didn't expect, and it's just, I don't know. That's probably fun. That's a really fun scene for me. I don't know if it's necessarily my favorite. You think just like Bilbo overall might be your favorite part, or? Yeah, I mean, I think Bilbo is probably I feel like every time Bilbo and Gandalf, it's probably that. Anytime Bilbo and Gandalf interact, like in a big way, like at the party where how like he scratches the door. It's just like there were so many subtle things with Gandalf. I think when Gandalf and Bilbo are together, it's fun for me. And because it was that other scene with Beorn, it wasn't really him. It was kind of the Gandalf scene. And then it's like Bilbo's so innocent, but he's so important, and Gandalf knows he's going to be important. It's like they know something bigger than everybody else, even though they don't. Right, that's probably what I think I like so much. That's not a particular scene, but I think that's why I when you asked me that, that's why I went to the unexpected party, and then why I went into Beorn's house or whatever. But what about you? I think that I'm never really sure. I think that each time something different about it is my favorite, or even just while I'm reading it in the moment, something might be my favorite for a few chapters, and then I remember the next thing that's going to come. I think that what probably permeates my entire experience with The Hobbit as being my favorite thing is Mirkwood in its entirety. Okay. I like the because that's when Bilbo really comes into his own. He does sort of prove to himself that he can do at least, talk successfully and be clever during riddles in the dark. But that's about it. And then even after that, he's a little unsure of himself. But then he, fights off the spiders, and then he has the success in the in Thranduil's halls, and so I think that that's probably the biggest pivot of the story, since it really is just a story about Bilbo. Obviously the dwarves are there the whole time, and they're the catalyst for everything, but it's about Bilbo. Yeah. And then I
have always loved elves more than other mythical things.
Mm-hmm.
And so imagining the Thranduil's halls in Mirkwood is always something that is really enjoyable for me.
Yeah.
Just trying to conjure up the imagery of what they must look like as like, you know, like truly woodland elves. Like the Lorien elves live in the woods and they have their structures in the trees.
Mm-hmm.
But that's not what I think of when I think of like forest or woodland elves, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Thranduil's people seem to be more like that. So I think that that's probably, if I had to pick a single thing, that would be my favorite part.
Okay, cool. So, is there anything that stands out to his halls that make him like this time it made it more like you were able to imagine it better? Because when we're there, it's really they just got caught right in Mirkwood, and then
they describe the gate and they describe like
prisoner.
a couple of the rooms, and that's about it. I think that I paid more attention to the gate this time than at least I remember thinking about it the last couple times that I read. So, you know, I have a better idea of what the gate looks like. Also, in the Kindle edition, it has a drawing representation of it.
Oh, okay.
But the halls are, aside from just, I think it gives you like some general like kind of scene building from Bilbo's perspective. But the rest of it you have to just totally imagine. And so it's just totally imagined on my part.
Oh, fun. It's probably cool too, because like Bilbo's in such like awe of the elves, and they're the enemy almost at this point. Even though they're not, they're just doing what they do. Like they're defending their halls.
It's just a big misunderstanding, and the dwarves are stubborn as shit.
Yeah, it doesn't really seem like many people get along with the dwarves because of that. Like
they're like stubborn and awful. But and then also, you know, historically, elves and dwarves are at odds with each other. Even if they're not enemies, they're just like kind of fuck you, dude.
Yeah. seems
by
like
nature, I don't like you.
It seems like a dwarf would be like, I can count on you, but only once like you've gone through the freaking hole there and back again. Then it's like, now I can count on on Balin or whatever, you know.
They seem to be more like it and it might not even necessarily be true. It just might be that they're more honest about it, but I think that it takes longer to gain like the trust and true friendship of a dwarf than it might some other races. Certainly men, because men are short-lived. And that's what it always comes down to. Is how long does that race live?
That's
and so therefore everything that has to happen is more relative, you know?
Just like a dog.
And so then, you know, by that logic, it probably takes longer for an elf. But dwarves are stubborn as well.
They live longer, right? Like 200?
Elves are immortal.
Okay.
And then dwarves live for a very long time.
Oh, okay.
I don't know exactly how long. I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's probably it's in the hundreds.
Okay.
I think it's longer than 2.
Cool. Yeah, 2 just seems silly. Like, why just 2?
Yeah, it's a really long time. And then Numenorians lived for, you know, as much as like 200 or 300 years in some cases, if I remember correctly. But now the watered down version of men, they live standard human lives. That's why Aragorn's.
I was
like
about to ask about him.
67 or something in the trilogy, but he looks like he's very young. I think he ends up, after him and Arwen get, you know, married and they're king and queen of Gondor, I think he dies at like 150 or 16, something like that. I can't remember, but he makes it to close to the old Numenorian ages because he's a direct descendant.
Yeah.
But
so Aragorn was. While we're in the Hobbit, Aragorn is born, right? We don't have any like
Aragorn's alive.
We don't have any evidence of him, right? There's nothing that. Is there any like tie between those two books that like other than the ring, you know, that like that happened in the Hobbit and he pulled that from here, or he did something that ties them together. You know what I'm trying to say?
Well, Gandalf immediately suspects that the ring might be a Sirius ring.
Okay, I do remember him like kind of being like, but then Gandalf was just like, I'll let it slide.
Yeah, he decides that it's, you know, not pressing enough at the moment.
Store that one away. They're
still under the watchful peace with Sauron. Sauron was, at this point, had been defeated for, you know, several hundred years or whatever, but they, everybody's lulled into this sort of, you know, like if it hasn't happened in the past 100 years, why would it happen now? You know, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
What else may have been a connection? You get a lot of really big connections. The main one that I can remember being that this whole escapade was entirely thought up and instigated by Gandalf because Gandalf felt that Sauron, while trying to build his strength in Mordor, might try to utilize Smaug. And so Gandalf was like, how do I get rid of that dragon before it becomes a problem?
Okay.
So
he's like, let's play on the greed of the dwarves and the revenge, those two, and then easy. And then he had a feeling about Bilbo, whatever that was, whatever instinct guided him there.
Right. And so that's the main big connection.
Cool.
Which of course is stuff that got written long after, but as far as if you look at the whole, then that's the main connection, is that Gandalf started this whole thing because he wanted to get rid of Smaug before Sauron could utilize him somehow.
Cool.
Even if just in like influencing Smaug to then go fuck up the elves or something, like not necessarily ally with him, but do perform some subtlety that convinces Smaug that he should go do this that would also help Sauron's cause.
And short of him dying in the way that he did, it doesn't seem like Smaug was going to go down. Like it didn't seem like anybody knew about his one weakness, and it just seemed like we were talking about it earlier. It just seemed like luck of chance that Bilbo even stumbled upon him because he was sort of just trying to figure out any information at all while he was in the halls of Smaug or whatever, and it just seemed like he was just anything at all. Like and Smaug is over there just like, tooting his own horn, saying about how strong and impenetrable he is. And he's like, well, I've heard dragons are weak-bellied, just like, maybe they are. And he'll tell me. And he's like, no,
it's a logical conclusion for most things.
And it's like, in that process, he finds the one chink in his armor.
Yeah, the hollow on the upper left breast.
So, I mean...
Or lower left side of him.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine that Smaug would have ever gone down. He would have been so good for Sauron's cause.
Yeah, exactly. It would have had to have been, you figured that at some point somebody would have seen it. Mm-hmm. But what is it that causes that point? Is it that Smaug starts flying again, and at some point somebody just happens to notice it?
Is it under his wing or is it under one of his legs?
It's at his left breast.
Okay.
So it's like in this sort of area.
And in my eyes, I imagine him as like a 4-legged dragon with 2 wings coming out of the back.
Yeah.
Is that okay? Mm-hmm. It's not like a 2-legged with 2 wings.
No, yeah. He's the sort of popular version of a dragon.
Yeah.
4 legs, 2 wings, tail.
Okay. So under that, left breast. Okay.
Death breath.
Yeah.
What is it that he says? Like, I can't ever remember the full thing. His tail is a thunder shock. His wings a hurricane.
Oh yeah.
His teeth knives. Or swords.
Yeah, something is.
And my breath, death. Something like that. Oh yeah, his claws are spears. It's fun. Smaug's fun. I like Smaug a lot.
I did too, man. I really
Smaug's a great character.
The version of this book that I listened to, like, I didn't want to buy it. I know that's so petty. I just didn't want to pay for the audio version. I have the book already. And I figured like I could find a version online and maybe support some.
The Tolkien estate doesn't need a whole lot of support anymore.
Right.
They make enough.
And so I was looking around, and the only version I could find online was this guy that was reading an ASMR version, and I was like, oh no,
that's so weird,
drive me crazy. And I was sitting there listening, and it's almost like he took his narration at a normal speed and slowed it down by 25% or something.
Yeah.
Because it felt so slow. So I took the speed and bumped it up to 1.5. It sounded pretty good, actually.
Yeah.
It sounded really good. I actually enjoyed it a lot. And his voice for Smaug was really good with the speed up.
Yeah.
And every now and then it sounded like he was crinkling paper in the background. Like, dude, I get that that's an ASMR trigger, but stop.
I had never even considered that somebody might be making ASMR read-throughs of something.
That's what he's doing with all of the Lord of the Rings series.
Good for him. I bet he's killing it in views.
Yeah, I mean, he got me, so he got my view.
That's smart.
I'll even put them up in a comment and say, speed it up 1.5 and it sounds like a real audiobook.
Right.
If you want ASMR, take it as is.
Right.
But yeah, the voices were bad for me, like in regular speed. But speeding it up, it was nice. I enjoyed the ASMR video. And it was longer than the actual book, I think. The normal audio file is. I think the regular audio is like 8.5 hours. This one was like 10.5 hours of just slow. And I can't imagine the songs when he sang them in ASMR mode, because they were kind of even slow for it's like over the misty mountains golden, you know what I mean? Like that was the speed he was singing. So I was like, what speed were you singing in the studio? Like,
right. That's also really interesting,
you know,
that because he has to write his own melodies.
Well, he stole the one from the movie, for sure.
Oh, certainly now that the movies have come out, a couple of the songs that were in the movie and given a melody could use those.
Right.
But there's, and then also in the old animated one from the 70s, they wrote in a couple of the melodies.
Didn't they write
and those are the melodies that I think of, just because I watched that so many times when I was a kid.
They wrote the song for, like, when he's fighting the spiders, right? When he calls them, like,
Addercop and stuff like that. Yeah, I don't know.
I feel like they
one of my favorite.
That seems like the same song every time to me.
Maybe so, and I don't remember it, but that's one of my favorite things. Is whenever Tolkien like steps aside and says, "And no spider likes being called Addercop."
Yeah, who would like that? It made it sound like, and nobody would like being called an Addercop. Like, duh.
He's so funny. This book is so funny.
It was funny, man. Like it was silly all over like that.
Mm-hmm.
Like called an Addercop.
Right. But that is really interesting to think about, that he would have to write some of the melodies for some of the songs that are in there.
It was a good listen after I figured out my little hack to it. I might actually listen to his versions of Lord of the Rings if we ever want to continue the discussion for the future. Because I actually enjoyed it. There were some things about this book, unfortunately, just because of the series that it is and the way that I take it in. You know, just based on the day, sometimes like I'll get stressed out or whatever. And we were talking about it earlier, and I still missed a few scenes, even though this isn't the first time through the book, and it's been ages. Like I've had plenty of time to talk to people about it and think about it, and I still like missed a few important scenes, like why exactly
the Battle of
Five Armies happened. Like I assume it's over the gold.
Yeah, so because Smaug, goes to Lake Town
and then they
basically destroys it. They kill him.
So
so they come back and they're like, "Hey, it's your fault that Smaug came and fucked us up, and then we killed him. We fixed your problem.
Okay, that makes sense.
So we deserve some share, at least enough for us to rebuild, asshole." And Thorin's like, "Nobody can claim what's already mine." Blah blah. and so then in the standoff, Bilbo had found the Arkenstone, the heart of the mountain, like the most valuable individual piece of the entire thing. Thorin says that the one piece is more valuable than the rest of it together.
Wow.
And Bilbo had found that whenever he first ventures into the Horde after Smaug had left, because the dwarves didn't want to follow him at first, and he had his ring and all that. So he finds that just while he was walking around. He's like, "Oh, this is fucking dope," and pockets it. And then later finds out what it is, and is like, "Ooh, I shouldn't let Thorin know that I already picked it up."
Yeah.
And then he takes it down. He sneaks down one night to the camp and speaks with Thranduil and Bard and says, "Look, I'm going to give this to y'all, and that'll give y'all some leverage in negotiations with Thorin, because this is the only thing that he actually wants." And so then, but by that time, Thorin has already sent messages to his cousins, and the only cousin that immediately answers as far as the story is concerned is his cousin Dane, who lives out in the Iron Hills in the east.
Okay.
And so Dane's already on his way with all his dwarves. And so then Dane shows up. Thorin doesn't make the bargain for the Arkenstone, and then the fight's about to happen. And then that's when Gandalf appears and is like, "Hey, goblins are coming, so y'all should worry about that instead."
They're like, "Smaug's gone, time for gold."
Yeah. And so then the goblins show up, and everybody's like, "Fuck, okay, yeah, we need to fight the goblins." And then they fight the goblins. And then as they're losing, the Eagles come in, and they're the Fifth Army.
I remember them coming in. I remember them specifically coming in. And I always imagine the cartoon scene. It's like Gandalf is talking to Bilbo, and then these Eagles come in and drop rocks. It's like, oh my god.
Yeah. And then at some point, Beorn shows up and is tearing shit up.
Yeah.
And that's how the Battle of Five Armies goes. And then Bilbo gets knocked out and then wakes up and it's over. And we lose Thorin and Fili and Kili.
Yeah, and Thorin apologizes. He's like, "Shouldn't have ended like that."
Yeah. He sees the error of his ways, and he's like, "We should be friends." And Bilbo's like,
we were never not friends.
Yeah, right. That sort of thing. And
Man,
Bilbo makes the long journey back.
Yeah. Fili and Kili. That's, of course, why they made him have a fucking love story in the movie, because they knew he was dying.
Because he was going to be a dead character, and so it gives it some gravity.
Yeah. He already had gravity. I know there were 13 others, but... Fili and Kili. Yeah, that was I mean... I really... Like, all the hot points in this book, like, I feel like there are only probably about 4 main points in this book. Like, it's the ones that we already went over, the 4 in the movie that you told me to see. It's like the unexpected party, meeting Gollum and getting the ring, Smaug, and then the Battle of Five Armies, honestly, is really, I feel like, all I mean, you don't even necessarily need the Battle of Five Armies, because then it resolves it resolves kind of the same way, just we lose Thorin. I guess that's kind of a big deal. It'd be hard to explain that one off. Just
right,
Thorin died because he's so happy.
Yeah.
But yeah, man. That, I think now that we're talking about it, that scene with Smaug really got me today. Like, that one really, like, that stood out to me today. It was just like the imagery that he did when, like, Smaug opened his eyes and it, like, lit up the room from, like, the fire behind his eyes or whatever. And I was like, whoa, dude, that's like it made, that's probably why people started writing about dragons being, like, good rather than evil, because, like, he was obviously evil in this story, but, like, he had such, like, nobility too. Like, he just seemed very wise and, like, just like exactly what I would want, like, my dragon to be like, is like, I'm super strong and badass because I'm 1,000 years old or whatever, and he's, like, rubbing his tummy, like, showing Bilbo how tough he is or whatever. And, right. And he just talks about how, like, when he's bragging about himself and his wings blow in hurricanes, and it's just, dude, it's just, like, epic. And to think of, like, somebody riding that dragon and them working together, like, that would, like, that, I feel like, is probably what made them, like, come up with the whole story, because dragons get bigger every year. You can't just have some human riding a 1,000-year-old dragon, like, putting them together, and having them, I don't know. I'm trying to make something bigger than it needs to be, but it was very fun for me, because, like, I just from that I exploded into the other dragon worlds that I know and love.
Yeah,
that were.
I was gonna say, you're a big dragon dude, right?
I like dragons. I don't think of them as evil characters.
Things.
Yeah, I don't think of them as evil creatures, but I think typically
I think a pretty common through line. So I guess if you look at dragon mythology in reality, it's they're supposedly creatures that had existed at one time that men had to deal with, and they were evil. Yeah, there wasn't anything magic about them except by the fact of their unlikely existence, and they were just animals. They didn't talk or anything.
Eat the lambs of their
they were just beasts that were just predators for like everything. And then whenever you start attributing magical attributes to them and things like that, then you can give them higher intelligence and personality and stuff like that. And then I think by now, and this may have started, for all I know, 100 years ago, but by now, the general idea of a dragon is that they're, in general, and obviously any one dragon, just like any one person in real life, can be further right or left on anything. The dragons are just, in general, just ambivalent and kind of don't care.
That's really,
they're not inherently one way or the other. Yeah. Obviously, one could go one way, but as inherently, they're just kind of, like, unconcerned with, at the very least, any human notion of good or evil.
I feel like we've talked about that before, because, like, when you said that again, that made me, like, laugh and smile, because it's like, a dragon wouldn't give a fuck. Like, just like, if I lived to be 1,000 years old, I probably wouldn't think about, like, a 20-year-old human very highly. Right. That's stupid. But
it's just a thing in passing.
I'm sure that would happen. Just like how Smaug is not only, like, 1,000, but he's really strong. Nothing can mess with him, and he's got everybody's money piled up. It's like he's got.
There's like no reason for him to care about any individual thing,
and he's just like, and nobody wants to.
Or even like 100 years worth of occurrences, or potentially nothing to him.
It just means so little to him and his.
So it just doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Whereas elves being immortal, the elves are also inherently good. Okay. At least in the Tolkien mythos, it's expressly said more than once that elves are inherently good creatures. So that's why they do care.
Yeah.
Even though they too are immortal and typically much stronger and more capable than their, other the other beings of Middle Earth.
I liked the elves that were like on guard, like for the guards in Mirkwood.
The ones that
got drunk.
Yeah, they got drunk and Bilbo stole the keys from. Yeah, they're funny.
They're just so normal.
Right.
They're just like, oh yeah, elves like to drink too.
Right. Yeah. Elves like to get way too drunk on the job and.
Yeah, on the job.
Yeah.
When they're guarding 14 or 13 people. Yeah, dude, this book is just. I mean, we said it all, but like Bilbo comes into his own. Like it gives you a little bit of everything, like all different types of stories where he comes into his own, where he fights, where he's cunning, where he's kind of on the outside looking in. He wasn't a part of the 5 battles.
Yeah,
really.
exactly.
Like that's why if I could be a creature from this universe, I would be a hobbit.
Hobbits have it best.
Yeah, they just eat like 9 times a day.
Yeah.
They walk around barefoot.
They're just chilling.
Getting fat, drinking, meeting ladies.
Basically do whatever they want.
All day, it
awesome.
seems like. Yeah. I don't know any hobbit that works except for Sam. And the girl at the bar. What's her name? Rosie. Sam and Rosie are the only two that have jobs.
They conceivably have just like a little community. But like, Bilbo doesn't work, but he's rich.
But he didn't work before.
Well, his family is rich, so he inherited all his wealth and maybe some people have mortgages or something like that, but like he already owns Bag End. Mm-hmm. It's paid off or whatever the equivalent is. Yeah, he doesn't have to. He just has the wealth to not have to do anything. And I guess you can assume that other hobbits are that same way, but there still are jobs that need to be done for a society.
Farming and
someone's got to farm. Someone's got to run the bar.
Yeah.
Someone's got to,
butcher, I'm sure, and all sorts of just common towns.
There's things that have to be done. Right. But I feel like living in a community like that has got to be way more fulfilling than, because like my job is I sell electronics to entitled Americans. Like nobody needs any of the shit that I sell.
Nobody even really needs me anymore. Like, the more I do my job, I'm like, I am going to be phased out by a robot so fast. The merchandising robot that's coming out that doesn't exist yet, that I know is going to come out, is going to make me so pointless, dude. Like, a robot would know how many bottles were in the inventory, be able to fill the shelf after scanning that, like, label right there, and then it would know exactly where in the back room it was, too. It'd pull it from
That's what the Amazon bots at the Warehouse do. Have you seen those videos? They're wild.
That sounds awesome.
It's crazy.
And
they're
scary
moving
at the
like
same time,
at 45 miles an hour in the warehouse, just
that's awesome.
to the shelf, grab that, take it to ship, do the next thing.
See, the second they get the next level of that like can stock the shelf, they're not going to need me. They're just going to they're going to walk up to the computer and they're going to be like, tell me where, Napa Valley Reds are, and they're going to be like, aisle 12,
But when you're just like the town's butcher, maybe there's one other butcher. Where are they going to get meat from if they don't have their own meat?
Where are you going to take your meat?
Yeah. Like, you're then part of a community, and I don't know, I just imagine that it's way more fulfilling, and at the very least, even if you're like, I don't want to go to work today, I just want to be lazy today, be like, well, but the Shaffers are going to come in, it's Tuesday, and they need to get meat, so I better get there. And, that sort of stuff. It's just meaningful and matters. So much of modern society just doesn't matter.
And they probably feel like the exact same way. It's just like, this doesn't even matter. If I don't get him his, beef today, just go kill a bunny, and he could just kill his own rabbit and, get some meat.
Right.
But, there is something appealing to like the simplicity and like the tribal nature of like having a community that relies on everybody, and there's something very appealing to that. And like when you pile people on into like a big community, like big cities and stuff, it just, you're right, something is lost. And I could tell in Houston, just like when I lived there, just it was bumper to bumper traffic, just like here during rush hour or whatever. But it felt like there everyone was like beep beep fuck you, pulling each other, like cutting in front of each other.
These are just a bunch of maniacs.
Exactly, everyone was trying to get ahead. However it affected them was what mattered. They would just, if I get one car ahead, that means I'm one car ahead. Whereas here, just a lot more often, to me, it feels like we're kind of moving as traffic as a unit. You know, like we've all accepted we are traffic. Whereas in Houston, it's like, I am stuck in traffic. You know what I mean? It's not like we are traffic. Whereas here, I feel like we are traffic. We work together and we'll just get through it. There, it's like, I am stuck in this thing called traffic. So why do I have to deal with it?
On the whole, even though Austin's exploding and we're coming up on 1 million people, we still have the smaller town feel and haven't entirely been corrupted to the point that like a DFW or a Houston is, you know.
Yeah.
But even so, it still exists here. And so, yeah, you're right. Hobbits have it the best. It's either the Hobbits or, I mean, I guess literally the elves have it the best, depending on some perspective. Because like they can live forever. They all live in harmony with each other.
Yeah.
They don't have jobs, I don't think. They just do what they want.
Yeah, the only one working I know about is like Elrond.
And that's just because he leads the, Rivendell. But how much does he actually have to do for that?
He probably just has to make...
I don't think he has to keep anybody in line.
I don't think he has to keep any in line. I don't think there's any... Yeah, there's no navigating the streets for justice.
I think whatever needs to get done just gets done because whatever elf it is knows that that's his thing for the day.
It's like his job is more to like remember the history. Like he's master historian,
he's like lore master.
And lore master. Because like the only scene I can think of is like
Kevin
is
Feige.
like when we meet up with him. It's like, hey, this is what we're dealing with. Like we're stuck with this ring. Like what do we do? And then I'll call all my buddies and we'll figure it out. And, he's just the guy that you go to. He's your go-to guy.
Yeah.
Which is, I guess, is a good job. You don't need him until you need him, and then he knows exactly what to do. Then he knows exactly what to do, and you go snag him or do whatever you got to do. But dude, in the movie, they had a clip of him going evil. And now we're talking about Fellowship of the Ring. We keep it on the Hobbit, but like they showed like an evil side of him too, right? Like it was the other elf, the one in.
Oh yeah, Galadriel gets tempted by the ring.
Yeah,
and
he was the one that was trying to be like, throw it in the volcano.
Yeah. Elrond is untaintainable.
Yeah. That was a good scene now that I think back to it. Because he was like, just get rid of it. We're already here.
Right.
And then he lets him not throw it in there.
Yeah, and I used to think about that when I was much younger too. I was like, why doesn't he just kill Isildur?
Oh yeah, you couldn't kill him either though. Yeah,
that
would have been wrong.
And now I think because he's far too noble to kill someone of such noble lineage. If it had been like a much lesser human, might have done it.
If it had been Frodo.
But
yeah, even with Frodo, that was a fun scene too. Like, yeah, whatever. Enough of them though. Like, how'd you like the ending of this book? Do you like how they wrapped it up? Do you think like giving Bilbo like gold and silver and a pony, and is that just a nice like happy little bow on the masterpiece?
Yeah, and I think that it is just the ending of the book. Him getting back home and having to stop the auction, the wholesale auction of his house, and then largely have to buy all his own stuff back is just funny.
That's
like literally the only reason that it was written. I think it's just that it's funny, and so he needs gold to fulfill that joke. Yeah. And so I think that's all that it really was.
And then he already had money, so it's not like he was, even if he spent all of it, he didn't really want any anyway. Yeah, okay, so it doesn't matter to you that the ring didn't like corrupt Bilbo so much in this book. Like it didn't bother you that the ring didn't get to him as much. It seemed like right off the bat with
well, at
Frodo,
the time that was that the whole Ring of Power thing wasn't like a concept.
Oh, you don't think it was?
No.
Okay.
If he had any inkling of it, it wasn't. Even, I would imagine it wouldn't have been at the time of writing. I don't imagine that it would have been even a tenth of what it ended up being.
Oh, okay.
So the idea of maybe some slight idea of corruption would have entered Tolkien's mind, like, oh, maybe if it's a Ring of Power, with this idea of Rings of Power that I'm starting to get, maybe it does kind of corrupt the wearer after a while, but it doesn't. It has no bearing on this story that he's working on.
And that doesn't bother you though at all?
No.
Okay.
It's fine.
Cool. Yeah, because I thought about it a little bit, just thinking like that it wasn't such a big part of this story. Is that something that he just pulled? Like, okay, well, let's just pull Bilbo's ring out of this one and make it the focal point of this, and we'll just go off of that little Easter egg I left myself because I made Gandalf make a big deal out of it. Or do you think he had like foresight that is like my next book is going to be about this ring? Or
I don't know. Maybe not at the time of. Maybe because as I think I mentioned last week, he just sort of like on a whim wrote the first chapter. If I remember what I read in a letter that he had written his friend one time, or written to his friend one time, he just kind of like sat down one day and wrote the first chapter.
For The Hobbit?
Yeah. And then I was like, oh man, I really like this. I should try to make this into a book, and then, maybe I can publish it as a children's book. And so I think that, by virtue of that, he was having fun creating this mythos. Mm-hmm. And so as he's writing, I'm sure that his mind is just like going off like, oh, this would be like a cool, offshoot or whatever. Sure. Or, he's just like, weaving the whole universe as he goes.
And you can't be thinking about your future books when working on the current one.
So I'm sure that the threads were going out from, every point. But never really grabbed on to anything that he was then like, oh, and then I should leave this for later or something like that. I'm sure once he had like the whole piece, he was like, okay, yeah, I'm really excited to continue on in this universe, however it is that I end up doing that. And then he'd be like, okay, I remember this idea that I had while I was writing this section of the story. So let me see what I can come up with using that idea or stuff like that. I imagine that's how it goes, just going off of things that I had read, from him, talking to people before. But so, yeah, I think that, I think that's how it went. I don't think that he ever had any, not ever, while writing it, I don't think that he knew that the ring was going to be as big as it ended up being for, the whole of the core series.
Did you read the Chronicles of Narnia?
No, I never did.
I think the C.S. Lewis and him were
they were really good friends. Yeah,
and I seem to remember like them both being. It was either they were both religious or Tolkien was atheist and C.S. Lewis was super religious.
C.S. Lewis was super atheist for the first half of his life or something like that.
Really?
And then at some point converts.
Oh, okay. Do you know if Tolkien was?
I don't know. I don't remember that.
Because I feel like weren't the Chronicles of Narnia sort of symbolic of?
There's a lot of metaphor there.
Yeah,
Aslan is sort of like a Jesus figure.
Yeah, that one's kind of right in your face.
So that's what I've heard as well.
Mm-hmm. He roars the universe into existence. Like at first there was like nothing, it was all white, and Aslan kind of appeared, and then he roars and like it rips color into the world or whatever. It's a fun like little telling. Mm-hmm. But he's basically God, the creator.
Right. If I had a guess, I would think that Tolkien was atheist, just because the depth to which he creates the religious structure of the Lord of the Rings there's like no go between in like Christianity and what he creates. Mm-hmm. It would be, it's pretty sacrilegious.
Really? What's the religious structure in the Lord of the Rings?
There kind of isn't one. There's not like a church. I didn't
think there was. Yeah, I was trying to figure
but there are deities that created everything.
Oh, okay.
And the elves know them.
They used to know them.
Yeah. So there's a very clear and existing divinity structure to it. But there's no worship or anything like that.
Yeah. It's just like when Thorin died, like I think he was just like, now will wait in the halls with my uncle or my dad or whatever. And it's like, I was thinking like, that sounds super lame.
Well, because the dwarves were created when they weren't supposed to be.
Oh.
And so then Iluvatar, the one true god, says, well, I'm not going to the Valar that created the dwarves, says, I'm not going to make you kill these beings that have intelligence and stuff like that. They're now a creature of this earth. But their punishment is that they're not going to be alive for a while. So hold on to them. They're going to be, they can only wake up after my children, which are the elves. Mm-hmm. And then whenever they die, they don't get to come over to Valinor. They go and they come back here to your little, waiting area and hang out with each other until, like he says, the world is born anew.
Purgatory.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so they just get to go back to Middle-earth. They don't ever get to go to Valinor.
Oh, wait, they get recycled? Like reincarnated?
No. There's just at some point the world is going to get remade.
Oh, okay.
And then that's when the doors can come back to life or whatever. Whatever that ends up being.
I could see why there's just an all the time like animosity between elves and dwarves. If it was like
they're inherently set apart. Yeah,
from their creators.
Their very
like,
creation sets them apart and sets the dwarves as being lesser. Yeah, so.
Yeah, exactly. Sets them as being less. It's like you gotta wait, and you don't get to live as long or hang out with my guys when you're dead. Like, you gotta go to B class heaven.
Yeah.
Yeah, man, there's just so much in this universe, and I don't feel like he had any idea. That's probably part of the beauty of this book, is like he had no idea. Mm-hmm. And then afterwards, it's like I still have no idea. And then he goes and continues on, and then he fully makes the universe, and then with his son continues on a little bit, right? Like,
mm-hmm. And right now, to my knowledge, Christopher Tolkien is just gathering up his dad's notes, because at a point after writing the trilogy and The Hobbit, Tolkien never wrote like another novel or book. Mm-hmm. He just kept creating the universe. And he's like, and this is this dude's uncle, and this is how this happened, and blah, blah, blah. He's just like, and so he's just got like this office that's, maybe dramatically envisioned as just like filled with stacks of paper,
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and nothing's organized, and it's just like a huge mess. So Christopher has been going through and collecting everything and drawing it into a narrative. That's how the Silmarillion was written.
What a pain.
Yeah.
That sounds so confusing too, because like he wasn't, like, he's got to be a good note taker, but even like the best note taker
mm-hmm.
in the world.
I imagine it's like whenever Gandalf goes to Minas Tirith to look up like all the stuff about the One Ring, whenever he's trying to determine 100% if Bilbo's ring is One Ring.
There have to be literal pages that are contradictory. Like literally, like this.
There's
says
a
this
lot
guy's
that
this dad, and this
mm-hmm.
guy says this guy's actually this guy's dad. And, it's like
there's a lot of footnotes and stuff in the appendices in the Silmarillion where Christopher's like, I had to change this because it just contradicted this other thing, and
Sorry,
and so
Dad.
he just has to like organize it and make it into a cohesive narrative, and every book that's come out since the trilogy has been literally put together by Christopher, though it still gets credited as J.R.R. Tolkien being the author, because he didn't literally write what it is there.
Mm-hmm. That's cool. I wonder if he did that like with any intent for his son to continue on his work.
Maybe. And
because like if I was a big writer or if I was into anything or whatever, and I wanted like my kid to be successful in it too, like I would mm-hmm. consider doing something to leave them groundwork for their own, like,
right.
I mean, maybe as a writer, I would want my son to create his own world, but as a writer, it seems like, well, hey, I've already made so much success and I love this universe so much. Why don't I keep creating? And then, mm-hmm. and then, keep talking to my son about it. Maybe he can continue it on after I'm,
right.
continue the legacy, or at least someone will know my the work that I've done. Maybe he was doing it for him so that his son could read all his notes
maybe
and be like, wow, now I know this universe
some degree
Dad created,
I could believe that.
I don't know, just I feel like we all have this innate desire to be immortal. That's kind of why mm-hmm. well, that's kind of why we have kids, because we create them in our image and then we live on through them, and then we have something to leave our shit to. So
right.
like, I mean, I feel like we're all going for that immortality and
to varying degrees,
To varying degrees, and he's immortalized through his book and his works, and I mean, I feel like it'd almost be like Einstein asking his son to create the next formula that blew everyone's brain. It's like, dude, that was your gig. You don't have to like
right.
And supposedly Einstein's son understood all of the mathematics behind the equations, but he wasn't the thinker that his dad was, so he never expanded on it.
Mm-hmm.
But he was smart enough to understand the theories that his dad was teaching, but he wasn't, smarter or maybe creative, or like I said, but I don't know, I guess, these are things we'll never know, but notes to the author, right?
Right.
Stuff we can ask if there's a heaven. Hey, Tolkien, of course, if there's a heaven, I would know everything, because I would want to know it all instantly, so
right.
Then I would know these answers, and then you could ask me. But enough of that. Do you want to talk about the next book?
Yeah. The next book that we're going to read, everybody, is a book that at the time of this recording is not even out.
Yeah.
It comes out tomorrow, Tuesday. So whenever you hear this on Wednesday, it'll have come out the day before. Mm-hmm. The book is entitled Descendant of the Crane. It's by Joan He. which is it's a Chinese surname that we looked up how to pronounce, and we'll never get it right.
But she's
spelled He.
Did she write it in English, do you think, or Japanese or Chinese? Sorry.
She's I think what I had looked up, she's a second generation Chinese American, so she speaks English.
Right. Yeah.
Evidently, she grew up like reading the old Chinese epics, and so now writes. Well, this being her debut, this is going to be like heavily influenced in that style.
That sounds really cool.
So that was one reason why it kind of jumped out to me. I was like, okay, this is going to be, kind of inherently alien to everything that we've ever read.
Yeah.
I've never read something from the East,
Yeah, and the most experience I even have with that, culturally speaking, is what we've already talked about 100 times. It's like Japanese anime, which is, I'm sure, is very different than Chinese folklore. I'm sure that Japanese anime is different than Japanese folklore. I know there are animes that tell you Japanese folklore. It'll be very interesting to see like another country's folklore, and maybe even try and relate it to some of our more common stories. Like I don't know even what this one's about fully, but another princess story like Aladdin, where Jasmine has to become the real queen of her a kingdom. I can't even think of the words right now. I got a brain fart. But that'll be a lot of fun, I think, to read. Just it'll be foreign to us, and it'll be I won't be able to listen to it either. So that'll be really neat.
Yeah, you're gonna have to read it.
This will be a reader.
It's in total. So because it hasn't released yet, we don't know where we're gonna stop reading for this week.
Yeah.
So whenever it releases tomorrow, I'm going to find a good cutoff spot, and you'll hear at the end of this recording me cutting in to tell y'all what to read. But it's in total 416 pages, at least on the Kindle edition. So that's a relatively quick read. I think that we can knock it out maybe in 3 episodes, maybe 4 if it breaks up nicely that way. This is also going to be the book that we read in conjunction with our upcoming Game of Thrones episodes, like we talked about last week. So be looking forward to that this coming Monday.
I'm looking forward.
Yeah, we talked about it already last week. I don't know what to expect from Game of Thrones. I'm happy that it's going to be done. I'm excited more than anything for it to be done.
Yeah, I know that's a sad thing. That's such a weird concept to be like happy for the series to be over. But it's like I think if it was the books, I'd be like happy and sad.
Yeah.
But this one, I'm just like, okay, good. This should have I don't feel like they bastardized the series by going beyond what Martin has written. I think they're doing justice to it. I think
they did all they could do as far as that's concerned.
Exactly, and and they can't ask him to speed it up. That's how could you ask somebody to speed up their art? It's not for you to determine. So I don't think they could do a bad job. I mean, I think they could do a job that leaves people or myself unsatisfied. But I think with what they have and what they did, I think we can expect like a really fun, at least fun, season finale. But I think it'll wrap up nicely, dude. Because I think at the very end of everything, we're just gonna see like the nice little button, the nice little like bow tie that fucking Martin puts on it. Because I'm sure it's gonna be a similar ending. And we'll talk about that next time.
Yeah. On that note, we will see y'all Monday with Game of Thrones, and then after that, the first section of reading for Descendant of the Crane.
Yeah.
I'm Will Hedrick.
I'm Jordan Schaffer.
And this is Dog Ears and Timestamps. Go Tech.
Not only a book club podcast.
All right, guys. If y'all are listening to this, that means I didn't fuck up and forget to add this in. If we're looking at the book, what we're going to do... And actually, let me grab my copy of it right quick. My copy of it. It's on my Kindle. We're going to read the first act of the book. If you... once you get the book and look at it, you'll see that it's broken up into 3 books or acts. The first one, treason. Second one, trial. Third one, truth. For treason, being the first one, we're going to read that whole thing. For some awful reason, the Kindle edition does not give me pages. It only gives me what Kindle likes to sometimes call locations, which are completely unrelatable to anybody outside of a Kindle environment. So I won't bother with that. But it's about, if you look at the whole thing, the first act is going to be about, I guess, a fourth of it. The second act is 2/4 of it, and then the third act in the epilogue would be the last fourth. Is a very, very rough, bad math breakdown of how long the sections in this book are. So we're probably going to do this in 4 episodes. We'll read the first act, treason, and stop at the second act, trial. We'll talk to you all next week with Game of Thrones and then the book. See you then.